So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first art stream we are doing here. Perhaps one of many. I have thought about using this using streaming as an excuse to do my gesture drawing practice. Well, let's see how it goes. If you are not familiar with gesture drawing, it means, or in this case, there will be 30 minutes of structured practice. There are 10 drawings for which I have 30 seconds to complete it. And the website that I'm using will automatically change photographs every 30 seconds. After that, there are five 1 minute poses. After that, two 5 minute poses. And after that, one 10 minute pose. I actually used the model for gesture drawing classes when I was a student. So this is a process that is familiar to me from the other side. And of course, I have drawn some myself as well, although not necessarily quite as often as ideally. Anyway, that means that if anyone is listening at the moment, I will not be able to look at the chat during the first 30 minutes at all. I might ramble to myself a little bit, but after I'm done with the gesture drawing, I'm probably going to use the last pose to draw in some anatomy and ramble about that, which might be interesting to some of you. So it is about time to go. This is the kind of drawing where you have to be quite aggressive to get really anything done in the less than a minute of time that you have. So, drawing in the gestures. I think that's why it's called gesture drawing in English. Another thing that you have to do is really pick out what you're going to concentrate on. There's absolutely no way for me to, for example, do a good job drawing this entire arm in an extreme at an extreme angle in this time. That is in 30 seconds. At least the way that I like to do gesture drawing, there are actually some similarities with architectural drawing. as the way that I draw buildings from a model, or perhaps these are generalities of drawing from a model in any case, no matter what kind of thing you are drawing from a model, is using sight lines instead of trying to construct anything. So I'll try to see which parts are optically at the same level. For example, I am seeing here that the wing of the hip bone comes right about where the chest bone ends on the left side, and after that the leg comes out from that. And that's the sort of thing, the only sort of thing that you have any time for. Here the fists are around here, and that is higher up than either of the knees. The knees are around here. Once we get to the more than a minute poses, then I will actually be able to use my brain for a moment, so that it might be all that useful. I am not particularly good at drawing under pressure. But that is exactly what practicing under pressure is for. Now we are down to up to 1 minute. So now I actually have double the time that I did for the previous ones, which might be good or it might be bad. Of course, I have more time to actually work. However, that of course also means that I have more time to overthink things. Something that you are not really supposed to be doing is using your preconceived notions. So you might be familiar with symbolic drawing as a concept. That's basically the thing where you draw what you imagine things should look like. So in the case of lips, you will draw these very cartoony child drawing like eyes, instead of actually looking at what is to be seen on the model, or in this case on the screen. Of course, as such, I am looking at a model on the screen, so this distinction of on the model or on the screen is a bit artificial, if not incorrect. I'm losing my edge here a bit. I'll have to get back to actually. You see that the upper body is much too large, but that's kind of thing you notice relatively quickly. So I really should work my way up from the elementary components. So keep drawing these kinds of glowing stick figures, even when I have time to actually improve on them later. These kinds of iterative methods. Iterative method for drawing is actually something that I generally do when I'm drawing. I start with an extremely simple, like almost a gesture drawing sketch, and then start making measurements on that. And once I'm done with the measurements, I'll start drawing the anatomy, that sort of thing. Here we have the arm, comes to the same level as the bit behind the knee. We are looking at something like this, whereas the other knee comes, of course, much forward of that, but yet the the wrist of the other hand is forwards of that. At this point, I would try to start doing some kind of volumes, but not do a particularly good job at it because I only have 1 minute time. And here we are again at the level where I have to start adding some sort of a volume to this. And really the volumes are the same sort of thing that the same sort of method that I like to draw in any case. So really I'm drawing mostly the way I would anyway, but just doing it extremely quickly and under pressure. Now we have 5 minutes. So now we are starting to have some actual time to actually somehow halfway finish something. Angle is not correct. Of course, this kind of speed drawing methodology leads to some problems later on once we get to the 10-minute ones. In the case that I have made some mistake while rushing at the beginning, which is of course unfortunate, but a fact of life. I have the impression that this kinds of learning to draw extremely aggressively is quite useful. I took the chance to draw a lot on paper while I was in a hospital last year, and I think that helped with my my speed quite a bit. Here we have, say, the scapulae already. Probably shouldn't be drawing them in this early, but they are clearly visible on the model. The neck going down. The other arm is going behind the hair. Because I'm looking at quite a small monitor, and a photo on quite a small monitor. Ideally, you would be doing this in a classroom, looking at an actual person. But the realities of everyday life are what they are. You might notice that I am now about halfway through this one, as a matter of time, and this It's starting to vaguely look like drawing. Of course, since I have very little, if any, time to correct or erase for anything. All the mistakes I make keep staying here. Using something like a on there, something weird going on with the shoulder here. Using something like a hard pencil might be better for this. I'm currently using, yeah, you can see the really at this time with this sort of timing, it still doesn't really make any sense to start erasing even when I have some relatively terrible mistakes here. Oh, actually, I think I might have time already. We still have more than a minute to go. It might be a little counterproductive, or not actually, at least not what I am supposed to be doing, erasing and correcting here, but who cares? I'm going to do it the way that it feels the most natural to me. Model is extremely dramatically lit, which of course makes things more difficult, but also more challenging. So I might learn a little bit more from struggling with this than I would drawing in peace. The hands coming out here. I didn't notice that until now. So here we go. Number 2, 5 minutes. Try to calm down a little bit. Not panic quite as much. This is a relatively simple pose. What are we looking for? The hand is outstretched above. Both feet are relatively front and center. The other one is turned up a little bit. I am making an effort here to be more methodical than I have been in the panic speed drawings. About 1/3 here, perhaps another 1/3, not quite. The arm comes almost directly down. Of course, attaches to a raised shoulder. The other shoulder on the other side is correspondingly lowered. However, the other arm comes down almost, I think, entirely down. It is hidden behind the chest. And I'll have to get around to working on the chest. It is slightly turned back, although the shoulder is there, but it is not really visible. The center line of the chest is slightly to the camera right. Now the The dimensions are a bit off again, I think. Person appears to be wearing some sort of a body sock. Both legs are turned, have a bit of movement to them. This one is obviously coming forwards a bit, but not, I don't think, quite as much as I have drawn it. It's a bit of a mistake there. But, I think I have instinctively pulled it forward a little bit to correct for the mistakes I have been doing with the proportions. Well, tough luck. We are practicing here, so it shouldn't really matter whether or not I'm doing a good job. Although, of course, anyone who has worked at art will, of course, know that you can tell yourself that as many times as you want. But if you are unhappy with the result, it doesn't really make it any better. No, that's pretty horrible on the legs, on the foot there. At this rate, I don't think I'd want to use any of the gesture drawings as a base for the anatomy section. I think I'll end up drawing an entirely new one. Yeah, oh well, anyway, I'm almost out of time, so no problem there. I think going back to a sort of panic drawing might be a good idea for the next one. I entirely failed with the measurements in this one. I'm skipping the last 5 seconds here. So the final. Oh no, this is a pose that I have seen before. It is I find it quite difficult. Well, let's start with bounding boxes. I can sort of think of this as a square where most of the body goes, and then maybe half of that and the same way right is probably around where the other leg goes. As a dramatic kneeling pose in the desert. Hmm. We keep going with this great idea. The head is somewhere around here, top right. The knee is about here. The other knee is just below the back of the head. That would be somewhere around here. The hip bone is somewhere around here. So if we start, drawing a stick figure here, that would be about the length of the thigh bone. And of course, the shin bone is about as long. And that fits to the foot landing here around where the ass is. Unfortunately, the upper body, or actually the entire body, let's keep to the legs, honestly. The pelvis must be angled a little bit, since the other leg actually comes noticeably forward but of course the bone inside has to be the same length, cannot be noticeably shorter. We should end up with something like this, and then have the foot here. Then the shoulders. One of them is around the middle height of the head, and a little bit behind the, a little bit forward of the center line of the bowed leg. The other one is around here, behind the knee. Honestly, I think I have to pull the knee back. Let's pull it back here. Of course, under these circumstances, the pelvis cannot be quite that twisted. Although I think that the upper body must be relatively twisted. Hmm. What? Pelvis is going to be tilted forward. It's always tilted forward. You don't really have any choice in the matter. It has to be something like this. And then the spine keeps going something like this. So we have the volume of the upper body has to be rotated forward quite a bit. As such, the probably should be something like this. Problem is that pretty much all of this is covered by the arms, which are here at the front. This comes almost directly down and across to the other shoulder. And of course, even more unfortunately, the other arm is doing the same, but below this one. So little, if anything, of it is visible. That means that it has to go somewhere around here. And where we can see it is around the hips, where it comes over to wrap around something like this. Of course, with all of the fingers unnaturally splayed in order to make the make it even more difficult to draw than fingers normally are. This is, I think I'm doing a better job at this than I did last time. The last time I ran into this pose, it was also the... No, that is not correct. The head has to be much higher. Let's try to draw in the neck here. The neck is visible for a bit, and after that comes the jaw. It's something like this. Shoulder is rolled down, and the chin is obscuring a part of the shoulder, but after that, the rest of the head is visible. So here we are looking at something vaguely correct. Well, okay, let's not use the undo button. That's a bit too cheaty. She is not quite looking to the side, but almost. So I'm going to draw a center line here. She is looking a bit down. Yeah, this is noses around here. It's honestly, I think I'm doing a bit better than uh, at any point during this session. Ah, I'm running out of time though. To start adding volume here. There's a bit of actually there is very little curve outside by this point. That's exactly the kinds of the wrong kind of using a priori information. You have to use some amount because otherwise you just aren't able to guess or know what's supposed to be behind things that are, of course, not transparent, such as the arms. But there's a bit of a limit to what use of foreknowledge is helpful and where it starts getting counterproductive. There's more of the hand visible than there should be. I'm making sort of a mistake there, but not a problem. Let's try to get a bit of the volume of the leg here before I'm out of time. It's a bit of a counter curve here, and of course the mass of the lower leg muscles are there. Again, here the knees disappears under the sand, so this is not quite visible. I have to practically guess some of it. And we are out of time. I can't say that this looks particularly good, but it's practice. Ah, hello, Pig and Lapis. Yes, today is an art stream. I was hiking today and don't have the time or energy to talk about Russian. So I don't think this pose is helpful for anatomy at all. So let's uh, let's get a new one. So what do we want? We want something that has a bit of movement, but not too much. So mm, just some kind of a relatively dramatic standing pose might be what I'm after. Let's say with some, you know, arms have to be doing something. Let's have, let's actually have a bit of a contrapposto here. So here these, this leg would be coming forward and this would be going backwards. Something to that effect. So then, I like to measure by drawing kind of balls. The idea here is to have the kinds of sort of a voxel, volumetric pixel, so that the length here is 1 unit. And of course, when it is when you think of it as a ball, you can really draw a meridian on it like this, so that when you are, for example, when something is coming towards you, I think there's probably a more systematic way to do this, but here I would use this kind of thing to approximate how the volume of this item develops. So if we wanted to make this a cylinder, we'd have to make something like this, and then something like this, and something like this. So for example, simplified arm, or cylinders can be useful bounding boxes for arms or things like that, but they are not necessarily that. In any case, the measurements. The one ball here would be the cranium, so most of the head. And then, of course, you'd like to draw the spine. It's been a while since I've drawn from scratch again. I think around 4 heads is the kind of height that you want. Of course, it depends on the kind of person. Some people have longer legs than others. That would be, no, that would not be the shoulder. That would be this would be the shoulder. And in that case, we would like to have another length here. As the thing is, actually, let's hide these for a moment, and let's just draw something head on. That way it's going to be a lot easier to talk about the measurements and stuff like that I was going to talk about anyway. So here we need units that are considerably smaller, as the in many cases both the lower and upper leg are both 3 units high. So you would have the hip joint around here, and you would have the knees around here. However, the thing is that the hip joint is not in the middle of the, or rather, it is in the middle of the hip bone. So what you end up with is having a bit of hip bone above and below. So you would have the bottom of the hip here, the top of the hip around here, and then you would have about 2 again, let's say 2.5 for the chest, and then a bit of space for the head. You might like the head to be around here, and with this you have some space for the jaw and your neck. And after that, the I'm going to use about 2 units. Make this person about 2 units wide. At that point, we are somewhere around here. We have the clavicle level around here, and then about 1 unit down is going to be the sternum. So this is the broad bone at the front of your chest. And another unit down, this is not quite consistent here, is where until where the chest as such extends. So start around here, make it a bit egg-shaped. And depending on gender and person, the ribs can either flare out a lot more, or they can be relatively tight. For women, it's generally more tight. The sides of the chest go backwards, and then you have a sort of a back plane here at the rear. Of course, the spine keeps coming down. Thing about the hip bone, or hip in general, is that it is tilted forward. This the amount of this tilt is dependent on the person again, as well as gender. Women have hip bones that are twisted forward a lot more. You can think of the hip bone as a sort of a bucket. The shape of it again is among other things gender dependent. This might be a bit high. In general, men have higher hip bones, and women have broader and shorter hip bones. Well, let's make this person somewhat androgynous. That's fine. So actually, if you wanted to make a particularly feminine character, you might make the hip bone perhaps 1.5 units high. Who knows? So then you can start drawing in the features of the hip bone. Here at the front, at the sides, we have the sort of wings, and at the front, the horizontal structure is about halfway down. And you think of it as sort of a cut into the. Oh, that's not quite what I want. As cutting away from a bucket. Here at the front, we have these things that have the holes in them. If you've seen a skeleton, you know what I am talking about. So the pubic bone is this thing here. You notice that the hip bone actually goes further down than where the genitals are. So at the back of the hip bone, you have around 1/3 and 2/3 down, where the sacrum, so the crossbone is. This is the thing that you see from behind on a skeleton. So that's from the 1/3 lines. Well, the main mass of it is at that level, and it has a tail that comes about to the bottom of this bucket. In this case, I have drawn it a little bit too high. Let's actually use the undo button a few times. So if the bottom level is here, the point of it is going to be hidden behind here, actually. So here, 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 I think. That's looking a bit better. Now that looks a bit better. The wings of the hip bone start at the sacrum, where the sacrum and spine meet. And there is also behind here, after the part with the rings, there is a structure that has a sort of a hook behind here. That's actually fairly useful, interesting, however you want to put it, because the muscles at the back of the leg attached to that hook, so it's quite useful to have. Then the hip joint is around here. The upper leg bone protrudes a little bit and goes inward. So when someone is standing with their knees and their ankles touching, the upper legs are actually pointed inward. You have about the same way down. So even when drawing a male skeleton, the skeleton easily ends up looking fairly feminine because of this inwards bowing in the thigh bones. So then we have the shoulders around here, and the clavicles. The clavicles are a bit of a curve to them. They start right at the front and they curve to the side. And once they have curved to the side, they go horizontal again. And these meet the scapula. So this kind of long shovel-looking bone at the shoulder joint. Like this. The scapula has a bit of a ridge to it, not very visible from this angle, but relatively important for muscle attachments. So, a rule of thumb that you can use is that the upper arm bone comes to about where the middle of the gap between the chest and hip bones. Then you can use this as a sort of draw a sort of circle segment to find how long the bone needs to be. And in addition to that, the length of the upper arm bone should be about 2 units. Is about 2 units. I'm going to make it. I think I might have drawn the chest a little bit high here. I should be missing a bit here. This is the kind of things that are easy to correct for when you're drawing digitally. So let's put the end of the bone here. And the thing is that the forearm bone and the forearm put together are around the same length. So you can check this out, how well this applies to you if you ball your hand into a fist and raise it so that you touch your shoulder with your thumb. They should be the top plane of your fist should come about to the height of your shoulder. This is certainly the case for me. And out of this, 3/4 are the actual bone, and 1/4 is the palm in itself, and the fingers another half here. Let's take this chance to move things around a little bit here. No, I have to use the edit function to actually move move selections of a group. So here we are. That looks a little bit better. So this group has the bones. So I am going to add another group where I will doodle in some of the bones. So some of the deepest muscles. No, doodle in some of the muscles. Okay, so the deepest muscles. On the upper arm, there is a deep set muscle from about 1/3 up to the end here on both sides. On the behind, it is a part of the triceps, so the extending muscle group. On the front, it attaches to a different bone than the biceps does. Let's use blue for things that are behind here. So we end up with something like this on the other side. At the legs, we have the adductors, the muscles of the deepest inner leg that attach to this ring here and towards the knee. So you end up with this kind of a triangular structure. This is the reason that when you separate your legs, that the inside is more massive than the outside, like this. The lower legs have a kind of a curtain muscle as well, but you might not want to draw this since it's basically just up and down. It might add a little bit of volume to the bones, but it doesn't do that much to actually add structure. So then we have the chest. The abdominals actually come up relatively high and they are relatively blocky. Most of them, however, are not visible afterwards. You can basically draw them as a rectangle between the sternum and the pubic bone so that they attach to the outside of the rib curve and to the inside of the wings of the hip bone. Here we have the absolute top part can be identifiable on extremely muscular individuals. I don't think I have ever seen this outside of Greek, classical Greek sculpture. But if you wanted to draw a superhero or something like that, that might be useful. The belly button is at the again at the level between the chest and hip bones. You have a sort of separation below this here. So again, if you are drawing something for someone extremely lean, you might want to divide the abs into 8 sections, but generally it's they separate something like this. You have a center line, and then these kind of separation lines, and the muscles lift out on all sides of these kinds of structures. So the method to avoid drawing so-called pencil abs is to well, you can draw a flat plane first, and then once you've subdivided it, um, you could probably do this with a block model. So just draw in some block here that has height, and then draw another here, it also has height. You should of course do a better job at this. So doing it something like this, you might be able to get an idea of which parts are lifted and which are depressed. Let's try to lighten that a bit. Yeah, that was successful, and now I can use another layer to actually draw what kinds of thing you might want to draw in that case. So remember, there's something is lifting up. So what else do we have here? At the bottom level, we have the pectorals, the breast muscles. They attach around 1/3 down here, so around here. The pectorals have a couple of important parts. One of them starts up here, and the other one comes down. Drawing this one can be more difficult because it sort of counter curves something like this. So getting it right, especially in perspective, can be quite difficult. Then you have some fat under here. If you have, if you are thinking about an athletic man, this would be a relatively small amount, but it adds to the volume. So again, coming up from the bone, you have some volume and lift to the structure. So this is in profile. If you are drawing breasts, then they will attach around here and around here. So you would want to have them droop a little bit because they are just fat. And of course, because the breasts attach under the pectoral, this means also, or rather, this is the reason that the breasts get moved when the arm moves. So if you have a person pulling their arm up, that means that the pectoral is drawn up as well, and the attachment point of the breast is much higher than it would be if this person were holding their hand or arm down. So in this case, you would have a stretched one. This can make the volume almost disappear if there is relatively little volume to begin with. So at this point, we might want to start with the next level. So at this point, we have the on the arm, the upper arm, we have the biceps. So the main muscle that curls your hand. This attaches to 2 points. Once on the head of the upper arm bone, and once at the point where the scapula and clavicle touch each other. And it attaches to the forearm bone that is that rotates. I think at this point I should probably draw the forearm bones in a little bit better. There are two of them. There's one in the middle, and this turns into the forearm bone at the inside of the wrist. And there is another one behind it that starts off being quite small at the elbow, but this is the one that becomes quite physically large at the wrist, like this. And the blue one here is the one that rotates. So when we are drawing the bicep, if you make a 90-degree angle with your arm and then flex your biceps, you will see that the bulge is around the middle when your fist is facing inwards. But when you turn your fist outwards, the bulge moves forward. And this is checking for this is the way that you can easily remember to which bone the biceps attach. So because it moves when you rotate your forearm, that means that it attaches to the bone that rotates, so the outer bone. The double structure of the biceps is not particularly relevant usually. I guess if you were drawing a very muscular individual, you might want to pay attention to that, but mostly it doesn't do much. Then on the forearm, there are three, let's say, muscle groups. You can think of them as one going from the inside to the inside. So the inside of the elbow is the part that touches your chest when you lay it down. And the inside of your wrist is, of course, the direction in which your palm is located. And this rotates a bit like this. And of course, it has some mass. And correspondingly, there is the outside to outside group, which starts on the other side and goes to the, well, the not palm side, the knuckle side of your wrist. It also rotates, and it's going to be more visible on the other side from this angle. And then there is a third one. This is the behind the muscles to the thumb. So it ends at the thumb in this perspective, as far away from us as it can be. And the other end comes out from behind, between the biceps and the muscle under it. So this is why knowing both of these muscles is helpful for being able to draw this muscle more or less correctly. And this is actually what causes the forearm to have a sort of triangular cross section. If you look at your forearm, if you tense it, you see that there's the outside is higher, and the cross section ends up being something like this. And that is because of this muscle that I have, muscle group that I have drawn in green. So getting to the legs, what do we have there? We have the large muscles in the upper leg. There are two muscles that attach to the head of the bone here, and they attach to the knee. You end up with this kind of double curve. The outside one attaches higher, and the inside one attaches lower. So this, if you look at some superhero media, you are definitely going to see this one. It bulges a lot on very muscular individuals. So what else do we have? We have one that attaches at the middle of the edge of the hip bone here, and that is the thigh muscle that comes to the middle. So you end up with volume here. Like this. So what else do we have? I think we also have the main curve of the lower leg at this level. It is on mainly on the outside, like this. And then we really have to get back to the midsection. There is let's take the next level again. At this edge of the hip bone, there is a teardrop-shaped muscle that again attaches to the around the head of the head of the thigh bone. That's quite a nice one. And then there are the ass muscles. This is going to be a little bit difficult to draw from the front, of course. Unfortunately, I can't remember them perfectly either. There's basically one that wraps around the wing of the hip bone and again attaches to the head here. This ends up giving the hip most of its volume. When you think of a curvy woman's hip, the broadest part of it is not actually where the wing of the hip bone is. It is at the head of the thigh bone. And on the back side, the actual ass muscle also follows the curve of the wing and then follows the curve of the sacrum and then attaches about 1/3 of the way down on the leg. So if you are familiar with the name butt fang, this is where it comes. The buttocks attach on both sides of the sacrum. So you end up with a bit of a gap around the head of the sacrum. So you would have a bit of a so-called butt fang here. And then if the legs were apart a little bit, you would have the adductors more visible here. But as they are closed, it's not quite visible. Then we have the nobly muscles behind the lower leg. They are actually quite a bit shorter, so you end up with this kind of double structure here. This is not going to be very visible from this angle, so you don't have to make a huge effort drawing them. Now then, getting back up a little bit, you have the muscles of the side. Again, this time attaching to the upper side of the wing of the hip bone, and this comes towards the middle of the maybe this time I move the chest a little bit too low. There's a muscle that attaches to the middle of that here. So if you notice this kind of double curve on a person, this is the reason for that. And it actually bulges forward a little bit. So if you have a lean and muscular individual, they will have a sort of cushion here at the edge. So then the actual side muscles, there's a number of them, at least 3 groups. There's one that comes from underneath the scapula, something like this. Then there's the one that comes right up like this and actually attaches to the arm here. So when you look at someone from the front and you see that they have this kind of gap in their underarm, that is why. So the front of the gap comes from the pectorals, and the behind the behind part of the gap comes from the corresponding muscle on the back. There's something on the front as well that I can't quite remember now, or maybe it's just the higher part of this bulging muscle that I already started drawing in. So then again, behind, much in the same way that the biceps attaches to the head of the upper arm and the clavicle in the front, the triceps also attaches to the head of the upper arm and the hook on the scapula. So you end up with, I think, what is on the inside a longer one. So you end up looking something like this, and on the inside it's a bit shorter. On the outside it's a bit shorter. When it comes to the neck, the big muscle to remember is one that comes from the base of the skull and comes to the um, gap between the scapula, the clavicles. This is the kind of muscle that when you turn your head, this is very good at indicating in which direction the head is being turned. Other than that, the back has a lot of muscles, of course, which will not be visible from this point of view. But a further interesting one is the large muscle of the back. This one attaches to the base of the skull and comes down towards the shoulders, and of course runs around the back, so it looks kind of like a diamond. I can't remember what this one is called in English. Has a Latin name, of course. And this is actually what you see when you look from the front. There's a sort of a gap. You have the clavicle, then you have a gap, then you already have this back muscle visible. Let's enlarge the head a little bit here, and let's add a bit of mass for the breast, since this ended up looking relatively feminine. And then you have the shoulder muscles. They have 3 parts to them. These attach at the straight part of the clavicle, and then around where the clavicle attaches to the scapula and until the middle of the scapula. So this is sort of wraps around the shoulder. It has 3 components. The front part is the highest. So if you lift your arm, you will notice that you get a sort of a platform, kind of like this, except that at the front it comes higher. This is the particularly you get a platform on top of the joint because there is no actual muscle really attaching there. So the shoulder muscles also attach around the 1/3 mark. I think I made a bit of a mistake with the pectorals there. They probably should attach at the 1/6 mark, thinking about it, since they disappear under the shoulder muscles. Yeah, that immediately looks a bit better. So something like this. What else do we have here that we might want to throw in? I think that's probably about enough for today. So let's make that a little bit. Actually, let's make this entire group a little bit transparent, and then I'm going to start use a new layer to draw a bit of the outline, at least on the right side here. So we have the breast somewhere around here. Then let's make this a sporty individual. there's a bone, so you get a bit of a stronger contour there. A couple of contours here. Since we're talking about a bit more of a sporty individual, you would probably be able to see the tendons coming up to these muscles. Then you have the knee. The knee actually has both the kneecap and the upper part of the shin bone has a protrusion in it as well. The inside of the shin is actually quite weakly developed. That is because there is actually no real muscles on the inside here. They are only behind and on the outside. So here we have the clavicle, a bit of the neck muscle, a bit of the back muscle here, then shoulder. Here we are going to have a bit of a fold. The upper arm looks a bit droopy because of the mass there, even if there isn't really any fat or loose skin to actually droop there. Here we have the outline comes out a bit because of the bindle of muscle there. But on the outside of the forearm, it actually relatively follows the bone relatively well. So we might have the chin around here, make it this size. Yeah, the proportions are looking all right here. And when it comes to the face, really what you should start with, which I of course didn't do as I say, not as I do, is cutting out a 2/3 plane into the cranial ball. And with this, the upper line is the hairline, the middle line. This ends up being a little bit up of center of the entire face. This is where the brow ridge on the skull comes. We would have the eyebrows somewhere around here, the eyes a bit under that. The third line comes around to the nose, and then a fourth line would come to the jaw, to the chin, and the mouth is in the top half of the mandible. I probably shouldn't add the marker line there. I should add it on this side. On the chin, you have about half of the space between the nose and the tip of the chin. The lower half is going to be the actual chin, and the mouth is going to be at this level. Again, the hairline is going to be at this level. So let's draw in a bit here. So seems fine to me. The upper leg might be a little bit too massive in comparison with the quite gracile lower leg here, but who cares? It's practice. Let's try to do a better job next time. So I have actually been recording this. I'm going to have to think about if I want to put it on YouTube. Let's think about that. So ending the recording in case someone is watching afterwards.